I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with the cattle market summary for the week ending May the 8th, where feeder cattle were higher again this week. We continue to see just enough support from the fed cattle market to keep these feedlots pushing on your feeder cattle or feedlot replacements. Prices this week were firm to $5 higher across the nation on yearling feeder cattle. We saw some gains of at least that much or a little more up in the northern plains. And a lot of the biggest gains were seen on the heaviest cattle offered, and some of them even over 1,000 pounds. So that's pretty positive market there. Calves were uneven again this week, and we just see odd packages of calves coming into town. Even in the southeast, your trends were up and down, ranged uneven from $4 lower to $4 higher in most cases. And get back in the central part of the United States and the plains and the Midwest, just didn't really have a good test of calves anywhere. But the big thing this week was the big storms that come across the midsection of the United States. The dangerous, deadly storms, tornadoes, flooding, and really a bad deal. Hit night after night. Hardest hit places were Oklahoma and Kansas, and in and around Oklahoma City and Wichita, Kansas, some bad deals there. But a lot of moisture. And that part of the country will take moisture just about any time they can get it. And even though sometimes the storms are deadly, most of your ag people will trade the risk of tornadoes for some big time moisture. And they got it this time. They had flash floods all over. Even down to Lubbock, Texas had flash flooding. And as flat as it is down there, that water's got nowhere to go. Oklahoma City had flash flooding. Western Oklahoma got rains again. All through the Flint Hills, big rains. Manhattan, Kansas had flash flooding there, but you know, a lot of those places that grazing is made now because they've got enough moisture there and enough pond water to carry those cattle at least through the grazing season. We saw graze out wheat cattle coming to town for the first time this week, and that helped the market too on your yearling cattle, because those green yearlings, you just don't find them, and the feedlot's really pushing hard on those cattle and making the markets higher and just helping the market for everything when they're pushing that hard for the kind of cattle that they want. We continue to see replacement heifer buying, even though we got tons of replacement quality heifers turned out with bulls and bred heifers everywhere. You just keep seeing guys buying more and more of them, and a lot of that has to do with the moisture that they're getting, because they know they're going to have plenty of grass with the amount of rain that we've already gotten this year. And going into this year in the central and the eastern parts of the United States, we're going in with the best pasture conditions and moisture conditions that we can really remember. Out west, still horrible dry. You know, California, Idaho, Utah, places like that, just horrible dry. And they've got to get some relief sometime or another. But you've seen those replacement buying, and that's helping the market on these feeder heifers. At the Paris stockyards, Paris, Kentucky, they had a load of 650 pound, mostly black-hided, few red heifers, bring 226.20. You see that on Cattle Market Central, your newest and best way to get real-time market information right there. And at 226.20, those cattle probably will not be replacements, especially if they go back west, not the kind of heifers that they really want to keep. Probably turn those heifers out for a little bit, but they're still feeder heifers. They could go right into the feedlot and very well might have. But your calf runs are really drying up, just like the yearling deal is too. As soon as these graze out yearlings come through, we won't see any really big strings of yearling feeder cattle come through until we get into late July, when those double stock yearlings start coming off some of those Flint Hill pastures and places like that. But calf deal's drying up too, just not very many calves running there. It's getting to the time of year where your sale barns will just start looking for a reason to shut down. On top of probably Memorial Week and the 4th of July week, you get into May, June, and most all of July, sale barns really wish they were doing something else, because it's hard to get enough cattle put together to get the buyers there, and then sometimes your market slips and then you don't have anybody happy right there. But when calves are offered, they're still selling really well. McCook, Nebraska this week, we had half a load of steers weighing 517 pounds. You see there on Cattle Market Central again. Half a load of steers, 44 head there, weighed 517, bring 314. A lot of people didn't think we'd still get prices like that. To be honest, there's probably not any 5-weight steers that are worthy of a $3 price anymore. But when you do see them, they can still do it. There's still demand for cattle out there like that, but just not seeing prices like that on calves because of the kind and the numbers that are showing up. Your calf feds are hitting the show less. Calf fed cattle is what I'm talking about. These are the calves that they were too big to do anything else with. Your big 650 to 750 pound or heavier, sure enough calves, and a lot of them coming right off the cow that they shipped late in the fall. They had to go right on feed with them. So those cattle are considered calf feds whenever they get done. Those are really hitting in droves on the show list. That's why the show lists are about to get bigger, but we've started getting into those calf feds. And it actually might kind of help us get through this big glut of cattle that we have coming, because those cattle are going to have lighter weights. From the last actual slaughter data that we had come in for the week ending April 25th, you saw your dressed weights drop 4 pounds. That's a big drop from one week to the next, and that's going to continue to drop because we're getting into those calf feds, more and more of those. You know, we've seen these feedlots just keep feeding these yearling placed cattle up weighing 15, 16, 1700 pounds. Your calf feds won't do that. They're going to peter out on you. They didn't get fully grown before they got on full feed, and it just affects them throughout their feeding period, and they'll just peter out on you. They become extremely inefficient to feed, and they just kind of hit a wall right in there. And it might be at bigger weights than what you're used to, up in the 1400s, but still, it's going to make our dress weights lighter. It's going to make less total amount of meat production, so they're going to have to slaughter more cattle to make up for those pounds that they're losing. Also, those cattle are not going to quality grade near as well. We've been seeing outlandish numbers of quality grading. Cattle have been grading 75% choice or better. Not sure if that has anything to do with that automated grading system that we have in most all the plants now, but sure enough, cattle are grading choice really easy, and have been because they've been feeding them so long. Guys don't feed cattle for 120 days anymore. 150 days is kind of a short feeding period. Grains are pretty cheap, cattle are high. They're gonna keep feeding those cattle and putting weight on them as long as they're efficient to do that. But these calf feds are not going to grade like the cattle we've been killing for the last several months. So we're going to see that choice back off a little bit, and in turn you see the choice select spread is widening out. In the last couple of weeks we've seen it go past $10 on the choice select spread, and now it's almost $12 there. But corn farmers been planting corn like crazy. Just last week they planted 34% of the crop in 1 week, and that's moving. But today's machinery and the type of implements they've got, they can flat do it, and they get some days that the weather's right, like it was a week ago. Pretty good, but this week was a little wet around, didn't get near the work done, but still, as of Monday, we were already 55% done. Iowa 68% done. So by the time the data comes out for this week, even though it was wet around, it really wasn't wet up in the upper parts of the corn belt, and especially in the eastern corn belt where they're running behind, but getting a lot of corn planted out there. Fat cattle just really didn't develop this week like it has the last couple of weeks. Finally come in and saw enough sales to kind of quote the market. 161 to 162.5 in the northern feedlot areas, and that's mostly steady. Kansas sold some cattle real late Friday there, $1 higher at 161. Dress sales in the northern plains were 1 to 2 higher, from 256 to 257. And we see these packing houses are making some money on these cattle. They still need to get something hanging on the hooks, so they're out there getting what they can, and so far we haven't seen the big glut of cattle that we know is coming, so evidently it's not going to be till June, but market's still pretty good. This week, and noticeably just this spring, you start seeing more old school fed cattle marketing. The fat cattle auctions, they still have them for those of you that live in areas that don't know that they do. In Iowa and South Dakota, they still sell fat cattle in auction. You know, that's quite an idea. You know, get cattle in front of people and make them bid against each other. It's a heck of an idea. It works in everything from art to pies and cakes. And it's a good idea, and they're selling cattle in those bigger fat cattle auctions, Yankton, South Dakota, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Tama, Iowa, places like that. Those good fat cattle, steers and heifers, selling in the low to mid 160s. And some of those cattle coming in pretty full and a long ways from where they need to die. And if you figure the freight and the expenses and the shrink on those cattle and the yield on them, sometimes they are going to bring back a dress price hanging on the rail for those packers that's far exceeding what they're bidding right now. So they bought some cattle 256, 257. Some of those auction fat cattle would cost well into the 260s hanging on the rail. But check out DV Auction. Got a Show Me Select replacement heifer sale coming up next Friday out of Joplin, Missouri. Get on there and check that out. That Show Me Select program has really been working well for people. But that wraps up your cattle market summary for this week. You can also see this report on the StockExchangeNews.com and from a home office here in Maysville, Missouri. We'll talk to you next week.